to raise hand on the bar on the bottom instead of on the participants thing.
Huh,
Zoom changed.
might be.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Melissa.
Okay, there's that. Okay, we are live streaming. And I'm supposed to make, is it Melissa I'm gonna make the host of the meeting?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, how do I do that? Here we go.
Hi, Stephen.
Good evening.
Louisa, would you mind doing minutes? I just don't have it in me tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
And where's,
I'm glad to see YEL isn't the only one who has minutes challenges.
Every committee, I'm sure.
Bane of my existence. YEL figured that
oh,
out.
so Melissa, I transferred host to you before I went start webinar. Do you have a button that says start webinar?
Yes.
You need to press that when you're ready, and that will let the attendees in. They won't get in until you do that. But we are live streaming.
I let him in.
Okay.
All one. Okay. Well, it's 6:30, so why don't we get started? I think we have critical mass. So I sent out the agenda via email, and really tonight we wanted to dedicate the time to thinking through what we'd be covering for the next 7 or so months until we get to the summer. And I was hoping, and I'm sure some of you have ideas for things that you'd like to talk about. And in that initial email, I also brought up a few things that we had either discussed previously or that I had thought of after our full board meeting last week. But so with that, I'll just say one of the items which I referenced was the collegiate money, and talking about how that had been allocated already. And kind of looking at getting our committee and board's thoughts on how any remaining money should be allocated and opening that discussion. And then the other item, which I think was newer, I don't know if we've really talked about it recently, was I thought an issue that came up a lot on Tuesday was public safety around the niche developments in our district. So I thought that in my time, at least, that's not something we've really talked about, and it might be a good topic to hear from the local precinct about, and just hear from niche residents, of course, about. Yeah, Robert, we can see this.
Normally,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Robert, you're stuck back in the attendees. Sorry, 1 second.
I'd also like to add, I had talked about this a while back, Norks, how they're distributed, I don't know. And I would like to know, we have a lot of older people in the community district, and most of them would like to remain in place. And how do we help provide for that?
Louisa, there are certain guidelines from the city for what, can you hear me?
Yes.
For what a NORC is, and we probably should just get that guideline, and I can try and get a copy of it this week, and I will send it around to the whole committee.
That's helpful. I think though, if Louisa, I don't want to speak for you, but I assume you're raising it because you want to have more of an in-depth discussion beyond like just awareness of the guidelines, and would want to think through, what content would be included in that, what speaker would be relevant, and sort of what the committee would want to get out of that.
And that should be jointly then with the senior task force.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong, but the sound on my computer is incredibly muffled. I'm not sure what to do.
Why don't you log off and log back on?
Okay.
Okay, while Louisa leaves and returns, I'd like to just open it up to other committee members to just bring up other topics you'd want to hear about. I think it might be maybe the best way to format this is kind of like get a list running, and then we can kind of go back to each and think through like who wants to sort of take that on and take on getting a speaker, and what outreach should look like, who would be like sort of the target audience of the community, and think through those details. So with that, ideas from people.
Well, Madge knows a lot about the NORC. I think she should not be one of the speakers, but be one of the board members that could be more knowledgeable
I
about.
think we can get someone from the Lincoln Square NORC to come, from Goddard Riverside. I'm sure they'd be glad to come. Or someone from Project Open, which is also a NORC.
Sorry,
Well,
say those both again for me, please.
Melissa,
So-
I worked with on this project a couple of years ago, and I did an extensive thing in my building. I work with Madge, and I'll share the experience we had, which you might find very surprising, and total reversal of the intention of this of the NORC system, and where we rejected it as a building. We thought it was superfluous, unnecessary, duplicative, and considering that we're in the midst of just about every service, primary healthcare service, senior services, whether you're talking about a program like 500 feet away from us at Betances, across the street, and actually the NYCHA housing, Madeline, I forget the name of it right now, but and Ryan Health Center and Goddard around the corner, and that just about everybody who's senior in this building has either home care worker, home health worker, or family. So we said that's a building. I mean, some of us disagreed, I did, but the consensus was, why do we need this? And then how are we gonna, devote our precious space available from what little office space we have, and how we're gonna sustain that? And not only that, the qualification is statewide. You have to qualify in 2 levels, state and city. And they're both formidable, and they encourage you to form coalitions. And there is one up here that has bridged the Columbus Avenue 95th Street project. That's one of the leaders in all of this, senior citizen social justice and so on. And so the building actually rejected it, and which very much to my surprise, we had a building meeting and became a little boisterous at a time, and said, what do we need this for? So I was quite surprised at that reaction, but that's an experience that I think we want to take into account way along, because some other buildings have had it for years and successfully. 61st Street and West End Avenue, I forget the name of the one of these old pre-war buildings, and they've had it for a long time.
Yeah,
And
so I think just to not get
Yeah.
too deep into the weeds, since like this is more of our like meta meeting to discuss the meetings, definitely like think we should raise and discuss that at the actual meeting where we talk about senior. So Louisa, you would just want to talk about NORCs? Anything else related to that? Is she back?
I'm sorry,
Yes, she's back.
Can you hear us?
with difficulty. I'm so sorry.
Do you have headphones maybe? That would help.
I went out and I came back. I don't know what's wrong.
Can you turn up the audio on
Anyway.
your computer?
What? I'm sorry, were we discussing whether we should have a program on NORCs?
Yes. Okay, I'm realizing that if Louisa can't hear us well, she cannot do minutes, so that is going to be a problem.
I'm going to try the headphones again. I don't know what's going on, because I usually use them.
Can you hear
No.
us? Is that better?
That better?
Guess not. Okay. Can you hear us at all, Louisa? Oh, we can't hear
Just
you.
can't hear you.
I don't like to leave a man behind here, but I'm not sure really what to do. So, Louisa, I mean, try a different pair of headphones. Maybe those are broken. I don't know what else to recommend.
Louisa,
You
can
can
you
hear me
hear
now.
us?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to get what I can.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, I'm sorry about this. I don't know what went wrong.
Okay. Anything else?
Discussing whether to have a program on NORCs, on whether they work, on where they are in the district, and if we think they're successful and should try to promote them or not.
Okay, that's
I mean,
helpful.
other than Robert, I have only heard good things about them. And I realize there are different levels of involvement in different buildings.
Well, I agree with you, and I think it's one of these periodic themes that should be addressed because things change in the city and the state all the time, really.
It's true.
And we should get an update on their preferred model, which is the cooperative coalition model. And we should get an update on that. We should know where funding is in these times, whether they're funding any of them, if they're going to continue to fund them. If those have been funded for years, they're going to continue to get funding, sort of thing. And then we want to know what the relationships are with the provider, social service agencies. JASA is a big one. And whether they're still dispatching their social workers to buildings and that sort of thing. So I think I agree with you that this should be addressed and a nice, thorough conversation.
Okay,
It's painless and it could be very helpful. And I'm just presenting the position of my building, and we're kind of different in this building. The problem with us is there's too many artists in the building. That's the problem. And the mindset that goes with that kind of community. So that I agree with you. I support that. Yeah.
Okay. It sounds to me like it should be done in cooperation with HHS and the senior task force because of the
Oh yeah. No, that's it. And that's the context that I did the work that I did on it in HHS.
So Louisa, can you take that on as a meeting agenda and we could, so maybe we should wait and kind of like peg these to a time at the end, but it could be March or
I was thinking even April.
okay. Okay, so potentially April.
Because I'm looking at March for collegiate. Do you think that's too soon to get all our ducks together on that? Because we
just need one person to contact HPD and get the information from them.
So Mark, you sent me a spreadsheet today. Can you speak to, does that, I didn't have a chance to review it. Does it answer our questions or?
It does. It was dated as of last August, but I'm pretty sure that it was represented to us that it's still current. It shows $36 million having been spent out of the 50, leaving a balance of 14. There was a project either earlier in 2020 or at the end of 2019 that was proposed to use a portion of that money, and it turned out that they didn't need it. So so that 14 still appears to be the balance that's left there.
Did some of that money, Mark, go to 108th Street? The Wish Fish project on 108th?
Let me call it up.
I don't see it on this list. I think this is one of the reasons that we would like to have a discussion. Everybody has a little bit of information and there's a lot of misinformation about it. So it'd be nice to get it kind of straight and this is what it was and this is
So
where
you should
it went.
invite, Louisa, you should invite somebody from HPD to come to the meeting and talk about
Yes, definitely.
And that should be joined with land use, don't you think?
Yes.
I guess if it originated from a land use.
Yeah. So the 108th Street was not on that list.
No, it's not, but okay. Okay. I thought that it had gone. Someone told me that money from Collegiate went to 108th Street, but I guess that's part of the misinformation.
I thought so too. But-
I have heard that too, and apparently it's not correct, because that would have shown up by now if it were there.
Okay.
Okay,
And I
so
also think Shelley should be involved in this. I understand that he was one of our institutional memories on this.
Well, I think land use, I mean, we were all involved, Paige, Richard, me, Ethel, it was all part of when it went through you, Mark, when it went through you, Lord.
Well, Shelley would be important because one of the so-called recipients would have been Independence House, and that was one of Shelley's Wishfish's projects. And so the good news is that you're still reporting that that 14 million is still there, and it was 4 or 5 months ago that Polly had raised the issue on that exactly 14 million where it was. So if it's still there, then on Mark's chart, then that's good news. But Shelley still is a source because it wasn't just 108th Street. One of the recipients would have been Independence House.
okay, we can ask.
Yeah, that's all part of the
Shelley-
query. That's all part of the query, yeah.
Shelley to attend.
Well,
We
Shelley's-
can also ask land use to do a joint meeting. Sorry, Mark, what were you going to say?
I'm sorry, I was just saying that Shelley's part of a member of land use. So
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't realize
There-
that. Okay.
There are a number of other places it could have gone, and we're not thinking hard enough, but I'm not going to get into that conversation.
Okay, so in terms of outreach to HPD, does someone want to kind of take on organizing this collegiate focused meeting? So that would involve approaching land use to ask them to do a joint meeting, and thinking through who the best speaker would be from HPD, and reaching out to them. And yeah, thinking through any other speakers who should be included or attendees in the meeting.
Well, I was wondering, do you want me to try to reach out to planning to see if there's anyone there that I know who worked on the project? They might all be gone by now, but I could try to,
I think this is an HPD issue.
I'm sorry,
I think it's an HPD issue.
that's HPD, okay.
I mean, I'm on land use. I'll talk to Richard about it. And Mark, you have a contact with HPD that gave you the spreadsheet?
I got the spreadsheet from the borough president's office. They got it from HPD.
All right, I'll reach out to the borough president's office and ask them to get us a speaker.
Okay, Roberta to Gail to HPD.
And to land use.
Land use, yeah.
Jeanette has her hand raised for
Oh,
one.
sorry, I'm trying to also take minutes just in case.
Oh, okay.
Jeanette, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to backstep a little bit and say, so are we just looking for topics to discuss each meeting for the year, which certainly is one approach, that we're just an information place for communities to find information out? Or are we looking to pick, one or two topics to really focus on, or to do something proactive or deep dive or something like that? I just was curious.
I mean, that's a
All of the
discussion
above.
for everyone. How do you guys feel? I feel like it kind of, in my opinion, it kind of depends on the topic. Like some things can be dealt with over 1 to 2 meetings. Some could be deeper dives. There are things that are thematically woven through many meetings, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I guess my thought, like, for instance, I think NORC is really interesting, but I wouldn't just want somebody to come and present, this is what NORC is. Even though that information is helpful, I think what would be helpful is, if the community board became a resource so that seniors in their building could say, oh, what is a NORC and how do we become a NORC, and how can the community board help us become a NORC, or how do we get those services? So like, I guess what I'd like to know is not just the topic of the meeting, but what's the point we're trying to get out of each meeting? What's the focus? And if it's just informational, that's fine, because I know there's, people are interested. There's affordable housing is so complex that we have in the past, done one meeting on HDFC and one meeting on Mitchell-Lama and something else. So I just thought maybe we should discuss that first before we go through the list of topics.
I agree with Jeanette about North because it may be interesting to us just to find out about it, but then where does it go? Collegiate is informational. That's just because it keeps coming up and we have to really
I don't know if I agree
know
with
what a
that.
set of facts are. But I think exploring what NORCs are and how they can be used to help older people in the community is really an important matter that we could get involved in. There's other types of affordable housing that we could get. I'm leaving NYCHA out of it at the moment because it seems to me that's a totally different area
It is.
to go into, but
Different area, but it's also, I would say, the two top topics. If I was to pick two to focus on this year, it would be NYCHA proactive, with the new administration coming in. What are the, how can we work with the community, and what are the things are going to be thrown at NYCHA residents? And it would be great if NYCHA had a set of principles that the community created that they're like, okay, you want to build on our playground? Well, these are principles, and let's have a discussion, and
Absolutely.
You'll see that that's just not possible.
But let me say this.
But I'm not sure of Madeline is how housing and the NYCHA task force, I mean, they work together, but that we shouldn't be stepping on each other.
Right.
Sure.
I like the idea of getting knowledge and teaching seniors about NORC, but NYCHA is going to be a tricky issue. There's so many, there's more priority in other areas than NORC right now. Madge has been talking to me for quite a while to get in NORC in Douglas, but I don't know if it's a top priority. I don't want to say it's not a priority. It's just not a top priority at this point with NYCHA.
Understood. Louisa, though, I want to I want to have that conversation about like the task force, NYCHA task force, and the housing committee's roles, like offline with you and Madeline and Steve potentially, and not.
Whoever else wants to get involved. Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. But Jeanette,
There's
sorry,
an
Lou.
idea that I've had coming off the Lucerne really, but there are a lot of old hotels on the Upper West Side, the Narragansett, and they tend to have long Indian names. And they're pretty empty in the same way that the city was able to co-opt them during the pandemic. It seems to me that these are excellent vehicles for redevelopment for affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And that this was something that we could explore, trying to get, link up places with developers that would be interested in this kind of thing. I don't know much about it now, but it seems to me there are a lot of these empty or kind of low budget hotels around that could be converted fairly easily.
Yeah.
And it's something I would be very interested in. Yes, Susan?
Project Find has done a few of those.
Yeah, I like that as a topic because it's like something that we could actually, create housing potentially if we were able to. I don't know how exactly, but it could actually result in a policy change or in the district.
If you can trust the developer today, the developers are not that honest, and I'm just speaking for myself. So
yeah, it depends on the developer, but it could be a nonprofit developer. So really,
by the way, I think Narragansett is owned by a nonprofit, or at least it was. It was run by the city related to AIDS.
But do we know they're empty?
There's one a block or two north of the Narragansett, which is privately owned and operated.
Right.
So
What I
right
mean
next to
is,
Dwayne Reed.
is it just anecdotal that we think they're empty because tourism is down, or do we know for a fact that they're struggling and they're empty?
I think that I think it's a mix. I think some of them are like old SROs, and they might actually be occupied. And then I think that there are commercial hotels that are. Yeah.
A lot of the hotels you're thinking of, for example, may be run by Lantern, by Whizfish. There's the Congressional is, the Congressional looks like an SRO hotel from the outside. It's not an SRO hotel. It's supportive and family protective. I'm trying not to get into the details of it, but a lot of the things that you think are SROs and look like them aren't. Some of them still are. For example, the project Fine took over was an SRO until relatively recently. The building on 85th between Broadway and West End, which was Volunteers for America, is now going to be senior housing. And a lot of these are done without a lot of splash. Hargrave's house, that's also Project Fine. Looks like a regular apartment house from the outside. There are a lot of these that you really have to get down and look at. And I don't know if they were all in the fair share analysis that was done for 108th Street, but I know we went and tracked a lot of them down, and that was done at that time. So we had a complete picture of it because we needed to do that. So somebody's actually got to figure these out, but they're knowable. And I don't think there are a lot of them left. Obviously, a couple of them in the mid 70s and very low 80s and high 80s were turned into tourist hotels, and obviously those are the Lucernes and the Belclairs and so forth and so forth. And we know about those, and whether they go back to their previous use or whether they stay in their interim use is an open question. But just because you see a building that looks like and historically has been an SRO doesn't mean that it's currently an SRO, because a lot of these things are done very modestly. I've done some of them. Some of them are done much less modestly.
Sorry, I see Peter has his hand up in the.
Susan had her hand up first.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure if it's like relevant.
Thanks, Madeline. I'd kind of like to go back to what Jeanette was saying and maybe take this to a higher level, like more of a 30 or 40,000 foot look at this, and maybe we can have a discussion about what we think are the top issues in the district from a housing perspective. I mean, if somebody were to ask me, I would say that certainly NYCHA is one of them, and affordable housing, and then the homeless issue. Now, I don't know if the homeless issue is something that we need to take a look at jointly with HHS, or if that's like whose domain that's in. But I think rather than talking specifics at this point, it might be really useful to talk about what people think are the big issues for our district from a housing standpoint, and then focus on those things instead of, a specific discussion right now of how to execute a discussion or what it should be. So is anybody else interested in that? I see Madeline nodding. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a good approach. And then from there, we can drill down on, I want us to leave tonight with a roadmap charted for the next 7 months. Like that's what I want to get out of tonight. So, okay.
And to the NYCHA thing, I mean, I don't want to step on toes here, but if I feel like personally, like that NYCHA is one of the biggest issues facing our district faces because of the crisis there. I'm not sure that it makes sense to me to have that hived off in a separate task force unless that's a benefit to that discussion. Because what should the housing, if it's a top priority, what should the housing committee be looking at if it's not that? So I'd like, and I know you said you wanted to have a private discussion about it, but that's something I'd love to hear about.
I'll agree with that to a certain point. I think having the task force, we can focus on, NYCHA's a mess, and I'm just going to say it. And to take up the whole committee, the housing committee on that subject, I think we should have a separate thing dealing with that. Anybody can come to the task force meeting and give their opinions, but there's so much going on now. I don't want to feel guilty about we just focusing on NYCHA and having people angry with me or whatever. I want us to be all working on everything, but
Fair enough. You're a better person than me. I never felt bad hogging the spotlight for affordable housing, but that's fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just back to like not wanting to have this discussion right here, right now, I think, I don't know how, like where we'll land exactly, but I would like to have NYCHA be a part of what we do here at the Housing Task Force, but maybe there's like a way to, have the task forces work around parallel, and then sort of like when there's big milestones or big discussions that need to happen, we like use a housing committee meeting for that discussion, something like
agree.
that. But
Yeah.
I thought the NYCHA task force when it was up and running, like full throttle, was great, particularly when we were having joint meetings with CB9. I personally went to most of those, I think, and
I thank you.
Well, I found them really useful. So I just don't want the NYCHA concept to be like feeling like it's sidelined or it's not important. But the homelessness issue to me is huge. And as I say, I don't know whether that's determined to be an HHS issue or a housing issue or a joint HHS and housing issue. But I know about 4 months ago, I tried to bring it up in housing and somebody said to me, oh no, that's an HHS issue. But homelessness and the housing issue committee seems to me like a natural fit. So we should have something about that.
okay, so Susan, you're advocating for, sorry, were there any other major themes you identified?
I think affordable housing still is, but less so than it was.
NYCHA affordable housing.
Certainly in my building, which has got 300 units, 100% which used to be rent stabilized in 1995. And now I think only 30 units remain rent stabilized. The building is, let's say, 50% occupied because everyone's left. They've either gone to stay with their parents or they've gone to their second homes or the apartments are empty. It's not a pressing issue right now during the pandemic that it used to be. I think that's all going to get rejiggered somehow. So I think that's sort of quieted down from that moment. That's just my opinion on it. I'd say right now, homelessness and NYCHA and seniors would be the big issues for me.
I agree.
Okay, I agree. I'm going to add one of my own, though, that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, which is housing segregation and fair housing, and sort of how historic patterns of land use and preservation have led to, very rich and very poor neighborhoods in New York City and kind of areas within our own district, and thinking through, I think so, both looking kind of back at what forces have shaped our neighborhood and sort of thinking about how we can, maybe change some patterns and, what we can do. So
How do you see that would go? I mean, as someone who, when I first moved here, my parents were appalled because they thought I was moving to a slum, which shows how long I've lived here. I personally find it fascinating how neighborhoods change and gentrify, and what are the factors that go into a gentrifying neighborhood. But where would we go from it if we go back to Jeanette on how we would be a committee that is active rather than passive?
So maybe it leads us to realize that certain zoning doesn't allow housing to be produced and therefore keeps our neighborhood homogenous. And we decide we want to advocate for a different zoning, or we think that some kind of inclusionary housing program would be useful. I think there are advocacy directions to go. I mean, maybe we don't advocate.
So you would advocate for MIH and that we would have that within our community district?
Yeah, so
I think that would be great.
Yeah, some kind of rezoning throughout our district to trigger MIH. Yeah, these are all, I think there are a lot of ways to think bigger and
I agree.
no. Other big ideas, I think this is a great tack to take. So any other big themes?
Ira.
Sorry, I'm having trouble like noticing when people's hands are raised. So Ira, go ahead.
Mine is a little long range and it's probably at the end of this cycle. The first batch of apartments in Manhattan Valley just went into bankruptcy. But there are a number of other blocks that were bought by very speculative owners in the last 3 or 4 years. And they're going back to the lenders, and the lenders are not interested. in community preservation. They're interested in their asset preservation. And these can become preservation destinations, both under our current zoning, because they can be used, if there are units in there, they can certainly be used to create zoning that would preserve the buildings. We could also get them into one creative vehicle or another. I'm not going to propose what that creative vehicle is. There are a number of people on this screen who spend their time or have spent their time creating those vehicles. But there are going to be more of them. And I think, and I can tell you that I can see some of the other batches of them. And I mean, certainly someone like Peter from Columbus, Amsterdam knows a lot of these buildings much better than I do. But I think you're going to see a lot more of them as the year goes on. Peter, you're there.
Yes. Sorry, Peter, also for not calling on you before. Are you done for the moment, Iris, so I can let Peter jump in? So
anyway, I think you're going to get a better idea of what that resource is later in the year, because there are not a huge number, but there are a number of people who bought a lot of buildings above 100th to 110th, and the market and the laws have changed, and it's not going to be good. I doubt that the way the thing is set up right now, it's not going to be good for people that live in those buildings, and it could be turned into a community resource, and it could be turned into a permanently affordable resource.
So are you suggesting that we would contact the owners? I mean, it's too late for zoning on that.
No, they can be used as the generating sites for inclusionary housing under the preservation option. It still exists, I think, under R10, the R10 and inclusionary. Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds right now.
Peter, did you have a
Yes.
related or unrelated?
Sure. Thanks for calling on me. Peter Arnson with Columbus, Amsterdam BID. I don't have any answers for you, but I do know that just there's so much stuff going on right now that the more knowledge that you can collect. Doug had put up something about creating a map of the different types of housing. I mean, NYCHA desperately needs help, but it's such a big project. I'm not sure where you go with it. And I think the task force is probably the best bet you've got for that. But what Ira was mentioning is there's now 2 to 3 buildings on 107th Street that are up for sale at a lower rate than they've been at in the past. There's other buildings that are potential for that happening. And we need to create pressure on DHS with what they're doing with some of the hotels, and look at those as possibilities for creating long-term housing. And I'm glad to try and help in the future. Today, I'm unfortunately in a situation where I really need to jump off half an hour ago. So I'm going to jump off now. But thank you for looking at all this. It is really complicated and it's a really difficult thing. And if I can be helpful, I will try. So
I just think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of a lot of these buildings that were bought very, very, very speculatively in the last 10 years in Manhattan Valley, going back to the lenders. And these are out-of-town lenders who have no interest in our community.
So
thanks. I've got to run. Take care.
Yep.
Take care, Peter. So maybe I'm just trying to think of how we can, I don't know, operationalize that or put that into a meeting.
It may or may not be an issue. You'll know in 6 months.
No, I think it is. I think preservation of whether it's like rent stabilized units in those buildings or the potential to make them into HPD, like capital A affordable housing preservation projects, is really interesting and not something we should, dismiss because we're not sure about the data. Okay, so we'll kind of add that to the list of big ideas for now.
Melissa, question. A few years ago, you had somebody come and talk about Airbnb.
Yeah.
And about how that was taking away from affordable housing in the community. It's probably not so much of a deal right now because people aren't traveling that much. But when the pandemic ends, if it ends this year, maybe it might be something you want to revisit.
Yeah. I wonder how impactful the legislation has been.
It's still going on. I have people Airbnb and Douglas houses. They come in with suitcases. I question them. So.
I wonder if, Jeanette here, I wonder if each of these topics we should have, dedicate 2 meetings for, maybe back to back or maybe, with some months in between. But the focus should maybe be more on policy. When we think about, the Lucerne, from my point of view, a lot of the problems were related to the process by which they opened up overnight without the support services, because they were afraid if they told the community that there'd be opposition. And that if we created okay, this is, every community board meeting, the public's going to raise the problem with our growing homeless population. What if we created some kind of a policy statement or the steps or the process of who to call and what, and that could be posted on the community board's website? Or, the same thing with the senior services for the houses or, different areas. I feel like they're all interesting topics, and if all we're doing is informational, then that's fine. But maybe it's not so much like we have to pick 10 topics tonight as it is we should pick a component of the topics we're discussing that is the focus of the meeting. Regardless, the first 15 minutes of the meeting is explaining what it is, but what are we trying to get out of the meeting?
I'm not sure I fully understood the piece about the Lucerne. Are you suggesting citing guidelines or something? Just if you could try to
No, making guidelines.
Sure, but so somebody also raised that there's other hotels that maybe are underutilized. I don't know if that really is the case. I think we would have to, find out. I don't want to sort of have a meeting on a problem that we don't know if the problem really does exist. But if we're talking about emergency COVID sheltering for the homeless in our community, maybe it's we welcome you, but at a minimum, this is what we ask, that we're notified, 10 days ahead of time, so we can notify the local community, adjacent community, that we have at a minimum these services, that I don't know what the components are, but I think that might be a proactive way that's positive, and that it's not a bunch of anecdotal meeting where nobody really can direct, where the community stands.
Yeah, so that specific proposal, I don't know. I struggle with that, feeling like it's in the purview of housing. But with the general actionable policy piece of your idea, I totally agree. And if there's a way to structure our meetings.
The community board, I believe, has a resolution to HHS saying that we want to be notified within a reasonable amount of time. I know that there was a borough board resolution, and I know that the borough president has requested that any citing be done with a certain amount of notice to the board. I'm not sure when the resolution was, but I know that we have one in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I wasn't really arguing the specifics. I was more sort of trying to provide an example of, somebody said, oh, homelessness is an issue. So, and obviously it relates to housing. I definitely think we should do, joint committees. But, we can't do much about the homeless problem, frankly, the community board. If we should decide, okay, we should advocate more resources, let's determine who should get those resources. Is it, health and hospitals, is it police, is it, local nonprofits, or whatever it is, we should try to figure it out, or else we're bringing up a huge issue. We're having the community come in that's excited to talk about it, but then nothing at the end of the day, a year from now, all we did was inform people that have a discussion about it.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's a good point. I mean, although I guess I would say that in my opinion, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about that relates to like housing creation, like that is what we can do about homelessness, like housing, whether it's the preservation of buildings in the 100s or if it's, conversion of hotels, like that is us doing something actionable about housing. But point taken about not just like having speakers speak for the sake of speaking, rather like creating something actionable for the community to feel like they see results.
Guys, can I ask a question? Are we going to be taking input from the community? Because I see a lot of stuff in the chat and it's sort of distracting. And I feel like, at some point we always have a chance for the community to talk. I'd love to hear what the community thinks the housing committee should be discussing. Is that something?
Sure. So, as the co-chair of this committee, I, am open to community input, but at this point, I'd like to just hear from committee members. And then once we do so, I'm happy to open the floor to attendees. Also, no one's raised their hand besides Peter, who I, wanted to give a chance to speak on the Manhattan Valley issue. But if, people raise their hands, obviously I'll also respect that. But, okay. Any other, I don't know, Jeanette, were you done? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off or, in any way.
Robert has his hand up.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Robert. Okay.
Hey, hi. I just want to bring us back for a moment to, I think you hit it with the preservation theme of affordable housing as we know it. And that's our ability to support the preservation of affordable housing is the best way to go, because that's probably going to be the only way to go for a long time. And then I remind you that a couple of years ago, I don't know, maybe quite 3 years ago, I ran 2 workshops, 2 years apart, on HDFCs. And the second one, they were hanging from the rafters. Mark, do you remember that? They were hanging from the rafters. And I think, Susan, you were there, and almost fistfights broke out. My point is that, and much to my surprise, because I've been selling HDFCs since 2004, okay, as affordable housing for teachers and, young people, young families and that sort of thing, affordable, beautiful places. You put a few dollars in and you wind up in a, practically a luxurious apartment. Well, what did we find? We find the same contention, the same battle that's been going on at Mitchell Lamas, because it's essentially the same category of housing, where you have the long-term occupants and owners of these affordable co-ops that really want to sell out, okay? And we know that we've lost most the co-ops in Mitchell Lama, the rentals, there might be 2 or 3 left, but the co-ops are also practically all gone. And those of us who still believe in the concept of affordable housing, if not for us, we're getting older and we're dying off. What about our children, you see? But at that meeting, it didn't seem to matter much at all to the people in the room, to a good number of the people in the room. They want to know why we were the obstructionists to them selling their apartments and going market rate, see? And in the FDHC world, which is not well regulated, you would have an HDFC, 3 bedrooms that would go for $150,000 that were being put on the market by my dear friends over there at Douglas Elliman and such for $500,000, $600,000, okay? And no one touches them. So that's the question, we had to question, what about policy? And then that touches on, I think Janet was getting toward the policy issue also, so where does HPD stand on all of this? And it's going on right now. And I wonder, I think Ira pointed out that in the Manhattan Valley, a number of them have gone bankrupts, a lot of those buildings were HDFCs. And don't forget that there was a strong resistance to the method to help these HDFCs get out of trouble by accepting a monitor that we're going to work with you and we're going to help you restructure your finances. We're going to help you get out of debt. And then we're going to let you go. And then you wind up and you preserve your HDFC concept, okay? And a lot of the buildings said, no, we don't want you in our house. We don't want you. We just don't want you there. We can do it ourselves. And they did it themselves, and they just kept digging the hole deeper and deeper, see? And the ones that did it, doing it very successfully. I'm starting 2 HDFC co-ops up in Tremont and the Bronx as we speak. And they went through the monitoring, and they're supervised by UHAB, and we need to incorporate them into our discussion, and they couldn't be happier, okay? And not only are they out of debt, and they have a great financing plan, and they're selling their co-ops. We got a new bank that's, because the banks have to approve of to sell in your, to make loans in your building. So we have Chase Bank in that particular address, which I will not reveal. But the ones that worked within the system, and the city has had all kinds of programs. The Rolls Royce of them in the old days, I guess, was the J51, but they still provide extraordinary support for an affordable housing project to succeed. So that I think along, staying on a different track altogether, the North, you have to revisit these things. These are not topics that you address once or twice. Every few years, you have to go back and see what's happening. So we need to find out what's happening with that niche. And it's a substantial niche of HDFCs. There are a lot of them. They're all over the place, citywide. And so that we want to go back there again and find out, okay, so what is the roster now of those that have signed on to the monitoring program and those that are deciding to go it alone and which are failing. And I think that we're entitled as a community board, we're entitled to get that information from HDFCs, and we might even invite some of the successful ones to really talk about their projects and how it's working out for them. So the preservation note is the key, is the way we need to get to the bottom of this and what we're doing to preserve what we have. I'm not even thinking of any new development. The only thing happening out there, as far as I'm concerned, with me, oddly enough, is luxury rentals. And they're all over the place as well. People have money. You and I may not have enough money, but people have a lot of money to spend on rent. $5,000 for a studio is nothing to a lot of people. But the preservation way is the way to go, I think.
Okay. Yeah, you hit on a few different things there. I do think we've talked about revisiting HDFCs a number of times. We never have actually done it. So I think it would be a good thing to do. But to me, maybe what would be helpful would be to hear from actual HDFCs in our community and, hear from those succeeding or maybe not succeeding. And that could be helpful. But if other members have other thoughts on how to pick up that topic again.
Well, I would be curious to know, HPD is very important in terms of housing. And as you said, they have many programs and we don't know about all of them. My daughter lives in an HPD finance building in Harlem. There was a neighborhood lottery, but somehow or other at the end of 5 years, people were allowed to sell. And that building now is what I consider a higher nannies in that building.
Right.
It is insane.
Yes, sir. Right. Exactly.
And at the end of 5 years, a lot of people who lived in the neighborhood were able to sell, were able to get a chunk of money. And I would like to know what HPD does and what are the limits of their programs. And also how we can, the more that we know about those programs, the more that we're able to focus our ideas about affordable housing, about how we can use HPD's programs and perhaps steer people toward them. Some of them work, some of them don't. This seems to me such a huge loophole. And this is what you're talking about also. So just in terms of having a few informational meetings in the middle here, I'd be very interested in having some from HPD come and tell us exactly what they do.
Okay, so one, HPD is very
Ignorance, but
much divided into like different, sections. So I think we can't, it's a hard ask for them to say like, have someone come and talk about all your programs. I think it's an ask better,
not all, but
divvied up into different sections, like someone to talk about preservation versus someone to talk about like special needs housing, which would be like senior and supportive housing versus, like
we had to do
tenant
some research
protection.
first.
Sorry, I missed that. What? Louisa, what did you just say?
I'm sorry?
I spoke over you accidentally and I missed what you said. But perhaps it was, okay.
I think Ira was going to speak.
Hold on. I
Doug
want to
has
hear
his hand
from
up.
Doug, just because I haven't heard from him yet.
Hi, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm just in a remote location right now. As a non-committee member, I just wanted to chime in and going back to Susan's point of sort of looking at 30,000 feet down, I think it would be a great idea since you mentioned, Melissa, that this is like a 7-month sort of look forward. And I think it would be great to know on the broad stroke, because it changes all the time. It's very fluid. The total number of the type of housing that we have in our district. I think it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out the inventory, even though it's ever changing. And those would be all things that would be categorized as affordable or anywhere in that kind of definition. So that would include HDFCs, that would include Mitchell-Lama rentals, Mitchell-Lama co-ops, rent controlled, rent stabilized units, any supportive housing, senior housing, and I'm sure there's more. Obviously, going to Robert's point of preservation, that's the whole, clearly we got to stop losing the affordable housing stock and then do whatever we can to add to it. So I just think if you're planning 7 months ahead, it's a good idea to get a total inventory. And we can add other categories, certainly, as controversial as it is, shelters, permanent ones, temporary ones, you can add it all in exactly what we have. We can find out what we need, with that working number. And there, as you mentioned before, Melissa, there are philanthropic and not-for-profit organizations that are looking for opportunities, and we can do our best to be squeaky wheels to get those organizations to invest in our neighborhood. There are organizations that are looking for buildings to do good things with, things that I think that the community would be very happy with. So those hotels, that were, I mean, they're given the fact that we're in this awful financial, pandemic and financial state, there will absolutely be bankruptcies. There will be foreclosures. There will be deeds in lieu of foreclosure. There's a lot of opportunity if you look at it from a half full point of view. So what we can do to advocate, to eyeball some of these opportunities, I think, again, to build on the inventory, to preserve the inventory. And also just in terms of Mitchell-Lama, there's also hybrids. HPD is the city of New York, which administers, like, Mitchell-Lama rentals are federally funded. Some of them are state run, some of them are, but there are, HPD administers the money from HUD. So it's actually 3-party, right? It's actually 4-party. It's the tenant, it's the landlord, it's HUD, and it's HPD for Mitchell-Lama rental. Anyway, I think I've taken too much time, but I just, I think it's good to sort of get an overview since we're looking 7 months forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. I mean, wouldn't we all love that data? I think it's a bit more challenging than.
I don't think it's that hard to get. No, I mean, first of all, many of our elected officials have that data. Certainly, DHCR. I mean, they have the number of. I mean, applications have to go in all the time. To find out exactly how many rent stabilized and rent controlled tenants we have in our district. I mean, our elected officials should have that at their fingertips. So I don't think it would be difficult to find.
So, Roberta, I think you've done a lot of work on this topic.
Yeah,
We've actually done this.
Or we've done this already.
we may have to update it because it changes. We've lost a lot of housing
It does
stock.
have to be updated, but we had an intern, I think, 3 years ago.
Yeah, from the Furman Center, NYU Furman Center, yeah. And that's you're right. And we work with him. We worked with NYU twice. I came on the board in 2000, whatever, and we had a student. This is when Victor was chair of the housing committee. We had a student there. He started one project along the SRO. And then we had another student also from Furman, and the one that Luisa is referring to, and he did a thorough job. And so, you know, Doug's point is well taken, but it's easier because of that document than we would think. It's just updating it. That's correct.
By the way, and Robert, I was at that HDFC meeting because I had a client, and it's a very controversial thing.
It's a hot topic, you know. It's a
Yes,
hot
because the people that benefited from owning their apartments in an affordable manner.
$250 originally.
Right. Now some of them would like to cash out
Right.
and profiteer. I don't blame them for wanting that. But then the issue is if they cash out, it is no longer an affordable HDFC.
Right.
Then what happens to the next generation of people that would like to also live in an affordable co-op?
I don't know if it showed, but I went into shock, actually. I was shocked.
Well, I think actually I was chair during those meetings, and it was because HPD was proposing some new language, which then they withdrew.
Yes, I remember.
That's why it was so heated,
Yes.
those meetings.
But it brought about the whole
dilemma.
ownership thing and the whole philosophical issue of, do you get to cash out and profiteer and then lose the stock, or do you keep it affordable so that the next generation of people can? It's the same thing with Mitchell-Lama as well. So
there's a whole organization that deals with HDFC, and I'm sure.
Well, I had mentioned it, Roberta.
We could reach
I
out to them, and they'd be glad to come. They're always having meetings and organizations.
So that
on our website, where we have the information from the fellow from Hunter that worked with Louisa and a couple of years ago, I think we can try and see if maybe Beta NYC could update it for us.
Sorry, remind me
It's a housing. We had an intern. We had a urban fellow who created a chart for us. That's on our website. That's 2 years old now. So it shows all the affordable housing. It shows where everything is in the district. There's a map, and there's also data about each building. So I think we can see if we can get that updated.
God, I totally forgot about that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's buried deep on the website.
Yeah, I remember that being an issue.
All right, so let's see what we can do about it.
Okay. Yeah, if you have a contact and you want to reach out,
I'll be glad to.
Okay. Okay, so Doug, just to return to your point, if we do have the data, let's say that that's dealt with, you would want us to focus on finding opportunities to create and preserve affordable housing in the neighborhood and like drawing attention to them. Is that?
Yeah, I think we need to quantify it, see how good, bad, or ugly it is, see what we have enough. I mean, I don't think we have enough of any affordable housing. I don't think you never have enough, but really just to really find out how we're doing in this district compared to other districts, and what we can advocate for. And yes, there's private and public, but there's a couple of really good organizations that are looking for opportunities. And, to the degree that we identify something in our district and then bring it to them. I mean, I'm thinking like a broker because that's what I do for a living, but it's just attracting them to our neighborhood. What I can do is see if I can come up with a short list of some of those not-for-profits and those philanthropic organizations that look for really good opportunities to create affordable housing.
I have a question. Us being an advisory board, are we allowed to, it sort of sounds like soliciting, but maybe not. Are we allowed to do that?
Of course.
Okay.
No money involved. It's just to say, hey, why don't you guys, this is a great opportunity.
Okay.
Okay, any other, sorry, Ira, I think I cut you off.
Well, actually, a lot of my points were picked up by other people in the interim. But I would make one comment. I don't remember all the subcategories of housing in the study, but there are some refinements that certainly could be made if they haven't been made already. So for example, I'll give you two that come to mind. When you talk about rent stabilized buildings, you have to talk about ones that are stabilized by virtue of being pre 70 something buildings,
74.
74 versus the 421A buildings. Similarly, when you talk about rent stabilized buildings, and the data is somewhat available if you really get into working with HCR, is what are actually preferential rents versus the full value rents. And there are all these other things that you need to be able to see to understand the full picture. We have a tendency not to realize all of the fine gradations of what is happening here. And even within, what we call quote subsidized housing, you have Section 8 vouchers, you have Section 8 buildings, and there are so many different layers here. And so, which reminds me, what there used to be the person at HPD that usually knew all the programs was the press officer. It was the assistant commissioner who did all the press work, who would always know every single program because it was their job to be able to talk about all of them. So that might be the person you're looking for. I don't know who that is these days.
Okay, I mean, I guess I want to push back a little bit on this idea that we need all this data in order to do productive work. I feel like I've heard multiple people say during this meeting, we need more affordable housing of every kind. So like that, just based on that, like I'm not sure I totally understand why we think we need like super,
You have to look at
detailed data.
I think if everyone looked at the data, they'd see that it's pretty full. But I think if once we update it, maybe before a meeting, we can invite people to take a good look at it.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay, I guess also I'm thinking that because we spent all this time and this person's time creating this database, and then literally none of us have looked at it. So just, to just push back.
Louise, that I have.
I'm sure you have, Roberta. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say no one does, but like, to me, it seems like not like the number one way we could be useful, but obviously you don't have to agree with me on that.
It's there, so we might as well use it.
Yeah, if it's there, yeah, totally. I guess I'm not advocating for us to spend.
Some people are data driven.
That's true.
And data does help when you're asking the city for something.
That's
you can put the data with it. You can say, we had, for example, in Susan's building, we had 300 affordable units, and now there are 30. If we look at not just Susan's building, but all the other buildings, we can say, look, there were 5,000 units, and now there's only 982.
Good point.
No.
Okay. Any other thoughts on themes we want to hit from the committee?
Attendees have hands up.
Yeah, I'm just checking if anyone else on the committee. Okay. All right, attendees. All right, Megan.
Hi. So I also agree that NYCHA, yes, hi, 1 second. I also agree that NYCHA and homelessness are definitely the top two priorities that are facing our district. I mean, NYCHA, the Wise Towers, we're having a lot of problems just with shooting and then the gas being off in the brownstones. So, this is a significant issue. But I hear a lot about, what the board feels that what they're entitled to from, certain organizations, certain departments within the city. I want to know what you guys feel that the community is entitled to. And I guess I'm going to specifically address this question with the former chair, because I think we all understand that the West Side Rag reported last week that the new homeless shelter is opening, and this was not information that the community board did not have. In fact, Mark, as reported, knew about it. Gail's office actually emailed me back and said she knew about it a full week in advance. Helen Rosenthal knew about it. Linda Rosenthal knew about it. So, what exactly is the sort of entitlement of the community to have information directly from the people that they elect and the people that are supposed to represent them, and not read about it in a local newspaper, regardless of whether or not the shelter was opening tomorrow or in a year. It's really just Winnie, one second. It's really about the lack of transparency to the community, and that's where I think that there's a huge disconnect here.
All right, thanks for your comments.
I'm
Mark,
glad to answer a little bit of that,
up to you if
Melissa.
you want to answer. Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll start to answer that. And Stephen's on the line. And so we did receive notice, and no one's hiding that fact. And the very first thing that we got raised more questions than it answered. And so the first thing that I did was to ask for more information. Since this was something that was not going to, unlike the recent examples where you find out on Wednesday that something's happening on Monday, this was slated to open in 2024. And the information that I got is different than the information that was in the West Side Rag. So I thought the prudent thing to do was to make sure that we got answers before we gave half information and incorrect information. And so we're setting out to try to confirm things before we go reach out to the public and try to share information that may very well have been wrong. So given the fact that we had a little bit of time to play with, I made the decision in that moment in between Christmas and New Year's to try to get some information before we shared. It wasn't like we were going to keep this a secret. And that is the answer to your question. In this specific instance, in general, I won't usurp the role of the chairs or the chair of the board about how to do this going forward, but we're looking for a way. And among the things that we were looking for, by the way, was the fair share analysis that they would provide to us. I know that the community would want to see that. So, so those are the things. That was the reasoning behind taking a little bit of time to make sure that we had accurate information before we shared it.
I mean, I'll jump in as well. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Hey, Stephen.
Just to pick up on Mark and to sort of support him again, I saw the letter. There was a very short and simple letter given to us about the decision that was made. I know that Mark in our conversations had been reaching out. We wanted to get, well, at the time I wasn't chair, he wanted to get more information, in 5 days to start to have to bring it up at a meeting in which we knew less than candidly that's even in the West Side Rag, which all needs to be confirmed. So I think his decision, and I would have supported it, was just to bring up something that we only can talk about the fact that would then bring up many, many questions that we simply couldn't answer. Didn't seem like a prudent conversation. That was his choice to make, although I would support it at the time. What I can tell you, is moving forward, we are doing several things, but everything will be in a very transparent manner. I think I speak, and I think I speak for everyone on this Zoom, as well as Mark, is, this is a transparent board. We believe in transparency. We want community feedback, and that's what's going to continue. And I can only say that that'll be my commitment. But right now we are still somewhat in that mode. We have very basic information. Some of the information that we have is not quite the same as the West Side Rag, so we don't even know. We need to. When I saw the article, it made me seem that we had to get more information. But we are in the process of reaching out. We are in the process of meeting with meeting our various different committees. So we are in the very, very first days of something that will open up in 2024. And I think that we want to have a thoughtful, measured approach about creating a very transparent process. The fact that it's brought up here, the fact that we're having conversations just already shows that we're willing to have these conversations, but we have to get a lot more information. All we really know is some basic facts that this is opening up, that it's 2024. We know that it's a women's shelter. And really that's the basics. There's a little bit more information. And that's the process that will move forward. Happy to answer any more questions.
Well, I think just my last question is then, if you're waiting on a fair share analysis, the building's already bought. So that really kind of feels that the deal is sealed and done. And so that doesn't leave a lot of room for an analysis to be done in the community to then be undone.
Let me clarify. We requested a fair share analysis, and that's what we'll do. We can't influence, I mean, just to talk about processes, what they've done is what they're doing. They didn't call us up to have a conversation about it. They called us up to tell us about their decision, and we'll engage with them. But we're requesting a fair share analysis because we think it's right for us in the community. We're requesting more information because we think it's right for us in the community. But at the end of the day, we will have a conversation and we will share our thoughts, but it's that they have a process, they have a decision-making process. Unfortunately, we will once again comment after a decision-making process. They have informed us of their decision, and you know now as much as we do, and we will now, in a very thoughtful, smart manner, work with everyone on this Zoom, work with our community board to go through a thoughtful process. But we're requesting, it's not for us. We can only request the information.
Thanks. Okay, I don't want too much of a back and forth, but thanks for offering your thoughts, Megan, and for answering Steve and Mark. L.E. Weinberg, you should be able to unmute.
Unmute. Hi, my name is Arthur Lubitz. I've been my family's actually been here over 120 years. I'm a physician, but I've worked in many of the poor neighborhoods. My observation is that the housing approach is bound to be a failure because either the low-cost housing where people are put in luxury buildings limit their income and therefore their upward mobility later in life, and also the quality of most rental housing deteriorates over time. That's been the story with NYCHA. That's been the story with every borough. I asked Mayor de Blasio when he came to our synagogue, why, I mean, Mitchell-Lama was a very successful program. After World War II, you had 2 million GIs coming back to the US. You had people sleeping on open fields who had fought in World War II. Nobody had money. And basically, Mitchell-Lama was the way to keep very good housing stock, stable housing stock, a middle-class work supply in this city, which it needs. You can't just have luxury people with nobody manning. And I don't understand why that's not the main thrust of the housing program. I mean, you're bound, rentals have failed for 100 years, and it's just not gonna work. And, you know, I'm just amazed that the thought process here is not advanced in 60 years. So I'd like to hear someone's comment based on my experience of 3 generations of living in New York, including my mother, who is a teacher and a single parent and survived the Mitchell-Lama housing for 65 years. And our co-op did not vote to sell with a profit. You can build that into the co-op bylaws as part of the mortgage agreement. That can be dealt with.
Okay, appreciate your comments. I don't think anyone's ruled out a focus on Mitchell-Lama or middle income housing, so we're definitely open to making that something we look at.
Well, in 1975, there were 1 million housing units in New York that were falling apart. And it was only co-oping that really saved them. And if you look at the last 40 years of history, you'll realize I'm correct. I mean, if you're really objective about it and look in the long term. If you don't, you're just spinning your wheels.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your input. Okay, so thank you both, members of the public. Helpful to know where your heads are at. Committee and non-committee, we've heard a lot of different ideas. Just to kind of read a few back, I think big ideas we had were preservation and hotel conversions, continue to focus on NYCHA, just general housing affordability knowledge, looking at HDFCs, thinking about homelessness and housing. And I think that that would be jointly with HHS. Probably miss some other ones, but would just like to kind of think as a group of how we can move forward for our next few meetings and kind of like operationalize a lot of these ideas. I like Jeanette's idea of kind of taking an initial meeting to focus on a topic and then having a follow-up where we really dig into what policy solutions there are. So that could be a way we approach this. Jump in, guys.
Well, I think what we've done in the past sometimes is where everybody takes on one topic as the lead, so to speak, as being the point person. So
Yeah.
you could start with what we think we could do the quickest for February.
So for February, we're actually doing the joint meeting with Land Use on Preservation Trusts. So it can be March. So I think that's actually great. It gives us an extra month. But that's a good way to look at it, of like which of these things could be accomplished within a month or two.
Well, as far as pulling in the resources, I mean, I work with UHAB, and we've all worked in but have a very strong position on Mitchell Almond. They're very serious issues, and that we can learn about. So I'd be willing to work on those two items in the preservation aspect for March. And one of the nuances is very important. The doctor mentioned it, that in the case of his co-op, and co-ops are part of the problem, you know, although that's what we want, because you re-up every 20 years. And it's up to the board decision of the co-op to stay in the program or opt out. And in the cases where we've lost Mitchell Almond co-ops, is because the board of directors, not HPD, it's the owners in the building. The majority have decided we want out, we want to go market. So, you know, again, the same thing with the HDFC mentality. The difference is a class structure, because the co-op, Mitchell Almonds, were designed for teachers and people who are already middle class. The HDFC initially was the low income person who can buy into ownership and contribute to the community and so on. So that it's important. So I'd be willing to work on those two things, and to bring us up to date, and bring UHAB in, and bring in the Citizens United for Mitchell Lama. It's a very powerful group, educational group for Mitchell Lama that I work with too, that would be happy. And they're essentially educational, and they fight. They go to the different developments and they take on the board of directors where it's going the wrong way. So it's worthwhile endeavor, very worthwhile.
Really. Okay, if it sounds like perhaps the Mitchell Lama topic, I mean, I don't know if we want to kind of revert to doing this as like one-offs. I do like the idea of more like long-term problem solving, but if that as like an actionable next step, you want to kind of gather who would be helpful to speak on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't combine them in the same meeting, because
No, I
they're
mean,
too late. Yeah. So, but I would, and if not March, April, you know. And it doesn't have to be 2 consecutive months, but in the planning, the way Roush is pointing out, that you work on it successively. You know, we're not talking about 6 months so that everyone forgets, but in close enough succession that we get the message, and then we can see what role we would play, which would be a supportive educational role. So that's what, and then we have support. You know, don't forget how strong Gail fought for Mitchell Lamas, and Scott. Forget about it. You know, we have some heavy hitters that are on our side as far as preservation is concerned.
Okay, so you want to take on those two?
I can work on those too. Anyone else who wants to join me, And well, Stephen has some very interesting notions on collaboration and that sort of thing. So I say that I will work on those two items within that one context of preservation, and Stephen may want to fold in, so it's up to him, how he wants to go on that.
I don't really know exactly what you're referencing, but
Well, we've been always playing with, and we're doing it tonight. We've always been playing with the cooperation between committees and people interested here, and then some of the younger people who are a little reticent or shy in the whole thing, and they may be on another committee, and this may whet their appetite, this sort of thing. So, so what I'm saying, I work on it. I don't need to work on things alone. I like to work alone, but I don't need to. I can work with someone else too.
Does someone else want to work on either of these two or both of these?
And any other committee with you work it out with Steve. Like I consider Madge to be the person that I can work best with on senior, issues in that same sense. So on housing preservation, so I know a lot about it, and I can work with others,
I can just speak for myself as I'm happy to facilitate any working together. I know, Robert, you've been a part of a couple of dual meetings that I've had with HHS and YL. And if that type of model are working, if anything I can do to facilitate that or reach out to others, I'll be happy to follow either your lead or Melissa's lead, anything I could do. But, I think that we should coordinate. I've been lucky enough to do that with YL a few times in the past, and happy to facilitate as you guys would like.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I think it sounded like earlier in the meeting, we were definitely thinking of some HHS collaboration on seniors and then on homelessness. So I think there's definitely potential for more like cross pollination.
The senior task force on seniors.
And the senior task force, thank you. And then I was saying the thing about housing segregation, I think is also like a land use and even preservation issue. So, so like personally, that's something I would really like to take on and put together for a meeting in the spring or summer, early summer is,
collegiate.
Sorry, what?
Collegiate. When do you want that?
Yesterday.
To me, that seems like a very short-term thing as well.
You think March or April?
Yeah. Do you think that's attainable since you kind of volunteered yourself?
Yeah, I'll start working on it tomorrow.
But we can also propose to land use that we work with them on collegiate, but it be on their meeting time.
Oh. You mean to like get it done sooner?
So that we would have if all of a sudden we have too many topics for the,
But that's a lot, that's still a lot of meetings.
We have. Sorry, Roberta?
It's just a lot of meetings for everybody.
True.
So land use is coming to your February housing meeting jointly. They may or may not have a housing meeting in February, because they may consider your meeting their meeting.
Right.
But we're doing Victor Bach, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like with collegiate, I'm not as concerned about land use. I don't know. I guess I should be, but
You want to say April or May?
Yeah, let's say let's target April. Like,
okay,
that's doable.
What we could do is also make a list of all the issues that have come up and then send it around, and who would like to work on which ones.
Yeah. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, we could work on that together. I have taken minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
not as good as yours though.
You guys will hate this idea, but we should do a Google Doc so that everyone can just fill in what they want to work on. But I think it would work well. Okay, I guess then if we are gonna kind of divvy up topics that way, I don't want to lose sight of that bigger idea of like making sure things are not one-offs and that we actually like put forward solutions after we have a discussion.
I like the idea of what you said of, we would have an initial meeting on a topic and then a follow-up one in which we discuss what we can actually do about it. So first the informational meeting, and which would be presented by one person on the committee or two or three, and then what we could do about it. And, that would be a follow-up meeting, and how we could take an active role, or what kind of active role we could take. What kind of policy position, perhaps. Doug coming up with his list of eager developers. I'm waiting for that.
I like the idea of that. I'd like to hear if other board members think that that could be a good structure, where 1 month we have kind of a discussion where we really dig into subject matter. The next month we talk through what CB7's kind of policy or advocacy position would be. And then I would propose that at the end of each meeting, we just check in on all the remaining topics and how people are doing on getting their stuff together for that particular meeting, sort of like a tracker.
Right.
Thoughts? Is that just unanimous approval by the fact that no one has said anything?
I think it sounds good. One quick question: is the February land use coming to the housing meeting, or is housing going to the land use meeting for the joint meeting in February?
It's the night of housing.
So it's the 8th?
Yeah.
February 8th, okay.
That's my birthday. Okay.
Oh,
well, we can have cake.
We'll sing to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Perfect.
sorry, who did I interrupt? Okay.
I think this was very productive.
Yeah, so as next steps, Louisa and I will work on the list of topics. And then we'll send it out to people and ask you to indicate what you'd like to work on. February meeting is that Nature Preservation Trust meeting. Sorry, I'm just making notes for myself. So, okay. So then for March, is it possible to try to shoot for March for collegiate?
Sure, I can ask tomorrow.
Okay, and if it's not possible, we'll
there's a lot on the plate we can discuss.
Okay, and then as sort of ongoing items, I think Louisa, you're potentially reaching out to Madge to discuss what like a joint meeting on like Norks and would look like.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
that would be April?
We should involve people that are running a NORC, and I suggest Lincoln Square NORC. They're doing a great job, and they've been very involved in the senior task force.
Sorry, who? Say that again.
It's the Lincoln Square NORC.
If I could just echo that, that there's a great relationship between CB7, thanks to Roberta, between CB7 and that NORC, and they're very active and they're very smart folks. So that's a great suggestion.
Okay, great. So with
Thanks.
collegiate though, hold on, since if on March we're able to like hear about the money and we assume, there's some left over, there might be enough time in that meeting itself to kind of talk about what we want to do in terms of advocacy. So I'm not sure if that will actually require 2 meetings, but it might.
Project Find had been asking for some of that money, and I don't know if they ever got it or not, but I can ask them if or maybe Mark can look at the list and let me know, but
Roberta,
yes.
I'm pretty sure that's the project that I may have referenced earlier in the meeting. Project Find at one point was considering asking for $1.5 million or 2 million of that remaining 14
Right.
million. And then there was a developer on Upper Broadway who is creating a bonus for himself by funding that instead. So I'm pretty confident that the answer is that there's a full $14 million available and that none of it is going to that Project Find project, which is on West 79th Street.
But Project Find is also looking at doing other buildings. So I'll reach out to them and see if, I have to call them anyway about the senior task force. So I'll just do two things with one call.
Okay, I just want to keep in mind for that, I think that discussion should not just be like, where is the money? It should be like, what is that money meant for and what do we think it should be used for now? Because, you know, it was allocated at a certain point in time, and like, does that allocation still feel like it's our priority?
Well, I don't think we have a choice. It was earmarked for new affordable housing in the Community District 7. It cannot be used outside of the district.
Does new mean new built?
Yeah, that's
it's not necessarily new built. They could take an old building that is presently not affordable housing, which is what Wish Fish has done and which Project Find has done, and they take the units that are there and they rehabilitate them. They build bathrooms, they build kitchenettes,
Right.
and they make it into permanent. It has to be permanent affordable housing within certain guidelines, and and when HPD comes, they can also tell us what the guidelines are.
Okay, great.
Guys, on a separate topic, if I might, what do we want to do in terms of having a joint meeting with HHS about the homelessness issue? I don't want to step on toes here in terms of the working group or any other discussions that are going on, but as evidence from the full board meetings, there's still obviously a lot of community concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be treated as we're treating other joint. So like, if that's something you want to work on, I think you can kind of sign up for it on the list. And, you know, I think I'd also want to work on that. And we can reach out to HHS and try to coordinate a joint meeting and kind of think through like what that joint meeting should look like. And
I wasn't necessarily looking to volunteer for that. I got sort of with other stuff. I was more just noticing that we're already up to April or May and we don't have anything on the calendar for this yet. And that seems insensitive to the community concerns.
I don't know. I mean, I hear you. We only have so much time, and
is HHS working on homeless?
I'm sure they are. It's like they're a big part of their mission. Okay, I'll reach out and find out what they're working on, and we can think through. I mean, honestly, the February set, March, I think we just don't necessarily have enough time to figure out like what we want to do. And that's why I thought collegiate would go well in there. Also, there's it feels like everyone wants to really get that done. But I think April is not like too far down the line, and we can try to make sure we have it then.
Sure, as long as it doesn't get, I just meant we're at April already and we're just sort of rolling along. It seemed like it was getting lost in the sauce, that's all.
Okay. Okay, so, all right. So with that, I think I was just going through next steps and we got kind of sidetracked. We'll make that list, we'll assign ourselves, and then just kind of let me and Louisa know if you're working on something. Just like keep us in the loop, please, with like who you reach out to, just so we can all kind of know that things are moving along well and be on the same page. Any other thoughts, topics, or suggested next steps before we conclude? Okay. All right, then I'm going to suggest we adjourn for the night.
All right, thank you. Good meeting.
Thanks all. Thanks for your ideas.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Hey, everybody. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark. Okay, Melissa, do you know how to read the chat later?
I think
I'd love to have dinner now. Just in something in there that we should?
I think that whoever runs, is Steve still on or did he? I think whoever like has ownership of the Zoom account is able to access the transcripts after the meeting.
Oh, okay. You know what? I have it here. I'm going to go through it quickly.
Okay.
It'll take 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Well, I know, but once you sign off, it's not going to be there anymore. That's the problem.
Right. That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Can you use headphones? Okay. Got it.
Okay, I'll see if I can like save the chat then. Okay. All right, I saved a version of it too, so I have it. Okay, thanks guys.